Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Culture Wave Media Network and the Cinema Wave Podcast. I am your host today, Darian Scalamoni, and I am all by my lonesome because our very own Liz Seiko is on her honeymoon. So shout out to her. Hope she's having an amazing time. Her and her husband are amazing people, and we're so lucky to have them part of Culture Wave. And we covered episode 9, I guess technically, of Yellowstone season 5 last week on the channel. We were doing really good with it. Thank you to all the people that have been checking out all our Yellowstone content. We cover a bunch of other stuff in film and television too that hopefully you find your way to if you're enjoying all that stuff. But today we're talking again about Yellowstone, about the Duttons, and episode 10, which is titled The Apocalypse of Change. For whoever did watch our review and discussion last week, I wasn't as much of a fan of the season 5 part 2 premiere. I know that some people also it was a hard pill to swallow essentially with the loss of Kevin Costner's John Dutton, and I think that the aftermath of his passing and what is to come with his death was handled much better in terms of the pacing and in terms of the overall story and the writing in this episode comparatively to the premiere last week. We get the most obvious thing that happens in this episode is we finally get the meeting between Jamie and Beth, which we were all anticipating. They save it until the end of the episode. But did you guys see it going any other way? I mean, obviously, Beth has had it out for Jamie for seasons now and years of this show being on the air. And I think he got exactly what he deserved. And I think that so much of what is to come is the relationship and the turmoil between the two of them. But now, as Liz and I actually did discuss last week as well, seeing Kayce get a little bit more center stage for the first time in a while is something that's very exciting to the both of us, but I'm the only one that could speak on it this week, so I will. I think Luke Grimes is supremely underused in this show. I do think that there's an obvious quiet nature to who Kayce is as a character, and he's gone through his own fair share of shit since the show was started, obviously, but I love getting to see him sort of have some emotional moments in this episode. I think that the moment between him and Tate, when he is having a conversation with Tate about what he wants his future to be, and dealing again amidst all the rumors that are going around, well, the news that's going around that John had committed suicide, which we all obviously know is not true, is something that is going to be a through line throughout the whole entire season 5, the second part of season 5, I should say. So that's something that really spoke to me in this week's episode. I thought that there was a lot more to bite on in terms of where we're going with this. We know that there's going to be retribution to be had. We know that Beth is going to want that. We also did see in the flashbacks of the Texas set scenes when Rip and the rest of the cowboys and cowgirl and Teeter were all in Texas dealing with rattlesnakes and other creatures, scorpions in last week's episode, that we got to see some moments of Rip and Beth having some romance, having some moments of clarity, and maybe a brief preview of what we could see going forward with the conclusion of Yellowstone proper, this season and this series of Yellowstone. We know we've gotten the prequels with the 1883 and 1923. We know that there are spinoffs coming out, one called The Madison, which we discussed last week, starring Michelle Pfeiffer, as well as The Four Sixes, which is expected to star Jefferson White, Jimmy, as a character, whenever they decide to make that. I know that they've been in development on it for a while. I think it might have stalled with all the other things that Sheridan's doing. I mean, developing Tulsa King and Mary Kingstown, and now Landman with Billy Bob Thornton, which I am excited to jump into. I haven't had a chance to watch that one yet. But again, staying on topic of Yellowstone, this was definitely an episode that I felt like we got to see more sort of play out as Beth's realization sort of comes into light of what Jamie did. And she needed to have that interaction with him to see specifically, could he tell her to his face, or could she even make an inclination that this was something that he could have done? And she makes the call to Kayce. Kayce makes his call to his military friend to sort of seek out who John Dutton's killer was. I wonder if they're going to do a big reveal, if it could be a big star or somebody lurking. But I do think that this was a better episode in comparison to last week's. But definitely let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking about not only this week's episode, but last week's as well. It's interesting discussing the John Dutton thing, right? Because some of the discourse online is that people are really upset with the fact that his character is now gone. We know, if you don't know, just again, a quick recap. Kevin Costner chose to not return to this series because of a lot of different things. It was partly creative, it was partly financial, it was to do his own thing with the Horizon film series, which I still haven't had a chance to see. But he's made 2 parts already. He wants to make a 3rd and a 4th part, and he's having trouble with financing. So could have been the wrong move for Costner, especially, but there is an obvious there's a lot of curiosity into how are they going to wrap this series up, right? How are they going to be able to sort of continue on without Costner? And they're going to be doing it with 4 more episodes after this one. The thing is, though, and Yellowstone is not a show that is completely surrounding John's character. He is the patriarch. He is the lead. There is so much that has to do with his upbringing, his background as a cowboy, which is why we get a lot of focused flashbacks with Josh Lucas playing the younger version of John. But this episode in particular makes you really care about the Dutton kids a lot more, I thought. Not only that, just Rip as a character. For example, like my girlfriend has never watched Yellowstone up until she watched the premiere of last week with me in preparation for doing this. And she sat down and watched this whole episode with me, and she was really enamored with Rip as a character. And we're like, I like this guy. And there is a goodness to Rip, which I think is why Rip and Beth have such a massive fan base following them. And I do think that's why the future of this show or any continuation of these characters definitely moves forward with Beth and Rip. Do you continue on with Kayce as well and his family? You definitely could do that. But I think it's harder to convince people on a continuation of this series without John, and what is going to be looming with the death of John, because even if they continue on past this season, whether it's calling it something different or doing a spin-off series, the reality is you can't ignore the fact that John's legacy obviously has a major part on these characters and on these actors because of everything that Costner had done. I think that there's a lot more emotional weight that is carried in this episode from Kelly Riley, who plays Beth, and Luke Grimes, who plays Kayce, for their father. Again, Wes Bentley, you love to hate him in this show. I know Liz had referred to him as whiny, and he definitely is. He's a character now that there's no redeeming qualities. He's just someone that he can't even stand on his own 2 feet. He's just doing all these things for political gain and for his own sort of ability to frame himself in a different light. Very curious to see what comes with the pipeline. They only have 4 episodes now to wrap that up, and Gil Birmingham has been a really welcome sight throughout these 5 seasons of the show, and he's a fantastic actor. So I do hope he gets to do something else, especially with Sheridan. I think he writes him great. I thought that the pacing in this episode was a lot stronger than last week's as well. Even though there was that awkward sort of jump from showing the Texas set scenes with Rip and Beth, where it's kind of where we start off the episode, and then having them dance, and then it just wakes up and you're not sure if it's a dream sequence or we're waking up actually in present day. And actually what follows that is something that I definitely wanted to discuss, and I'm curious in the comments, definitely let me know what your thoughts on this were. We do get a reveal that Summer, played by Piper Perabo, is still living in the house past John Dutton's demise. And we get another interaction with her and Beth, and it obviously goes the way I'm sure all of you can imagine that it goes. And she is not happy, and she feels a major disrespect. And Beth is obviously like, well, it's my father, and I want you to get the hell out of this house. And I do think I like Piper Perabo as an actress. I didn't love the whole Summer storyline. I didn't love the whole Summer and John romance. So it is welcome for her to go. The interesting thing is, I kind of thought that was one storyline that I thought that they could sort of just go without explaining. that she's just gone. I do think it's funny that she goes out of her way to say that she's like still on house arrest, and Beth is like, "You've been off house arrest for quite a long time. This is just that you are stricken to my lonely father and his needs and his desires, and so you've been in this cabin all by yourself because of it." So I definitely think there were some lighter moments as well to sort of counteract the real emotional weight that starts to formulate over the 48 minutes that we get in this episode, The Apocalypse of Change. One of the other things that I thought was really interesting, that we also get a little bit of a glimpse, and we lose out on him in last week's episode, and Liz and I talked about this, but it is still nice to see his character have a moment, is when we get to see a moment between Carter, Rip, and Beth's son in the bunkhouse talking to Rip about how upset he is and how he feels like people are just constantly leaving him, which is definitely a thread that follows suit with who he is as a character. It's still hard to get over the obvious aging process that has happened with both his character and Tate's character over the 2.5 years since we've last seen Yellowstone. But I do like the relationship between him and Rip and what's forming of that. And I just think it's really interesting the way that they're going about how they're framing this with Beth and Rip being at the center of it. And we get these whole things where you're starting to see affection from Rip and from Kayce as characters and men that are dealing with this real emotional change on them as characters and seeing what the death of John does to them as people. There are other things in this episode, though, that are really the opening scene with Beth and the female cop was an interesting scene. The constant marketing for Taylor Sheridan's products, which is obvious, but we know how it's going to go. It's still not perfect. I will say that, and I said this in last week's episode, and forgive me if you're a huge fan of the show. I started as a massive Yellowstone fan. I don't dislike this series. I thought this was a much better improvement upon last week's episode. But we're trying to wrap this up now. They're rushing things. They know what they have to do. We know where we need to end up with Jamie, and we know where we need to end up with Jamie's relationship with Beth, and that's the most compelling thing that is going for the series right now, because you don't have the through line of the politics with John as much. And I think it's a very valuable show on cable. I think that the Yellowstone brand is one that is important to continue in some way, shape, or form because of the business it's done for Paramount. But at the end of the day, it's a series that I still feel this lack missing Kevin Costner in the show. And I hope they can improve upon that. I'm excited to see if Taylor can come up with some really exciting things in the next 4 episodes to keep me engaged. By no means is this a bad episode of TV. It's just, I had said this last week too, like, I'm coming off of a crazy high with HBO's The Penguin, which, if this audience may not even be familiar, but it's one of the best shows I've seen in years. And the quality is just so fantastic week in and week out, and it's consistent and it's great and it's written brilliantly. And Yellowstone for me isn't hitting the same way seasons 1 and 2 did, even season 3. But I do think that they got me engaged again in terms of where we can go with this show, and hoping to cover episode 11 with Liz next week on the show. But let me know in the comments, what are your guys' thoughts? What did you guys think of Yellowstone in this episode and going forward, where they can go with this? I mean, not a lot to really discuss with this week, except we're sort of progressing along, and now we know that Kayce and Beth are teaming up and involved in trying to take down their brother Jamie and get some answers on who killed their father. So let me know in the comments what you guys think about that. Also, if you guys can give this video a like, I'd really appreciate it. We would all appreciate it here at the Culture Rate Media Network if you could also subscribe. We're on the road to 500 subscribers. We've had an awesome week. We're at 415 right now, so help us get along on that path. We can start doing more stuff for you guys. We have a lot of exciting news that we're going to be sharing with you in the coming months, on top of all the film and TV that we're covering. We're currently covering Yellowstone. We're going to be covering Dune Prophecy, the HBO series, at the halfway mark of that show. Mark and Vinny are animation gurus. They're currently covering Dutton, an anime series for us, as well as all of season 2 of Arcane on Netflix. We have Wicked coming up. We have Gladiator coming up, along with all the other awards things. I actually just saw Anora today as of this recording, a fantastic movie. So looking forward to discuss that as well. And I want to hear from you guys. I'd love to have a discussion in the comments. We love talking to you guys about it. So please let me know in the comments, what are your thoughts on the Apocalypse of Change, episode 10 of season 5 of Yellowstone. You guys can also follow us on all our social medias if you don't already. All that stuff is below me in the video right now, as well as in the description. We're on Instagram. We're on Threads. We're on Facebook. We're obviously here on YouTube. We're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you want to subscribe to us there. We're a little behind on episode uploads, but I will be uploading them as well sometime soon. So please get ready for that. But I'm just going to sign off. My name is Darian Scalamoni. Thank you for joining me for this review and recap of episode 10, season 5 of Yellowstone, and we will see you guys next time.
This is the culture.